Beautiful picture.
Great. So, all right. So I will get started. Hello, everybody. I am Amy Mason. I'm a Virginia Master Naturalist. Welcome to my Spring Ephemeral Wildflowers of Loudoun County, Virginia talk. So, first, let me introduce myself. I am married, mother of three. I'm actually from Montgomery County, Maryland, originally just across the river, but I've lived in Virginia for about 9 years now. I'm a certified Virginia Master Naturalist. I am the gardener at the demonstration garden at Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve, where I'm also the garden instructor and facility supervisor there. I'm an Audubon at home ambassador, Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy volunteer, as you can see. I also help out with the garden lab, and I'm developing a nature lab at my children's school, Frederick Douglass. And I have a degree in environmental management. I'm also a houseplant and succulent connoisseur. I'm generally just a plant enthusiast. All right, so what is the big deal about spring wildflowers?
Oh,
So, here's a big field of, I guess you could call it a field of bluebells. But so yeah, the idea of this talk is to make you aware of some really special plants that are in our wild areas that you can only find for a brief period of time. These wildflowers mark the arrival of spring, breaking us out of winter dormancy, lighting up the forest floor with little bits of color and life. I hope you seek these flowers out this spring and every spring from now on. I want you to get excited about these very special flowers because these are the ones that have thrived in this land since before we were here. These are the ones that have evolved to have special host pollinators of their own, insects that have evolved just because of the shapes of these flowers and particular little nutrients inside them. These flowers are a big deal. Their brief fleeting presence feels like a wonderful natural phenomena that only us in this area or this region are lucky enough to witness while they're here. You should be very excited about them. So, what is ephemeral? A lot of people may not really quite understand the idea of the word ephemeral, but general definition is something that lasts for a very short time. When referring to plants, ephemeral describes a short reproductive life cycle. Spring ephemeral flowers have a small window where they leaf out, push out flowers, get pollinated, drop seed, and die back, all within a very short amount of time before the leaves in the trees start to leaf out. Once all the trees have their growth for the summer, it's too shady for a lot of these plants. So they've got a short time to get their whole life cycle done so that they can come back next year. Let's talk about plants. My keyboard is a little happy. Okay, so these are some non-native ephemerals that you may be familiar with. We got the daffodils, crocus, tulips, hyacinths, and lilies. These are ones you're probably familiar with, but in actuality, none of these are native to North America. I have an asterisk on the lily because we do have some native lilies here, but not the ones in this picture. Those are Asiatic. So these all come from distant places that our local native fauna have really nothing to do with. They could care less about these. If you go to a tulip farm, you're not going to see a lot of bugs or bees buzzing around these guys. These bulbs were all brought here by early settlers in early America. By the beginning of the 19th century, it became a statement to have the most beautiful, attractive yard. It showed off your wealth. It was a way to show off. After generations of doing whatever our parents have done, this is kind of what everybody knows is what to put in their front yard. While these are ephemeral, they live quickly, they're very pretty, they're not native. So I'm going to talk about the ones that are native. So first one up is skunk cabbage. And this may not be the prettiest or the prettiest smelling flower, but it's the first one that comes out of the year. They can start coming out in January, most time February. They're just very interesting plants though, and they're very important for local native wildlife. A very interesting fact about them is that they've developed this cyanide resistant respiration within their cells. So they can basically heat themselves up about 23 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit above the air temperature. So they can push themselves up out of the ice and through the snow. And while doing so, they're carrying this smell with them. And that smell smells like a skunk or a little bit carcass-like, and it attracts carrion insects, which are flies or other things that are better at decomposing dead things. These are just super fascinating plants, in my opinion. They grow in moist wetlands, swampy areas, and once they leaf out and sort of look like cabbage, they feed a lot of wildlife. They're lightly toxic, but some mammals can tolerate them. Bears love them, deer love them. They're important. Let's get into the prettier ones. So the harbinger of spring, it's the one that really lets you know spring's really here. It's very tiny plant, very tiny flowers. As you can see, I have my wedding ring around the one in the middle. They're teeny tiny. They're part of the carrot family. Sometimes they're called salt and pepper flower because the little pink anthers turn into black, so it looks like little speckles of pepper on them. That's when they're ready to drop seed. And they attract bees and a variety of flies. And they're a myrmecophorous plant, which is a big word for what I just call these ant plants. So many of our wildflowers in our region are their seeds are dispersed only by ants. So, other insects and pollinators will pollinate from these flowers, but only the ants will go and take the flowers or the seeds because they have a seed coating on them that attracts the ants. They can eat the seed coating and then they leave the seed as it's indigestible. So then they end up planting it in return. That's you'll see a lot of the flowers I'm presenting are myrmecophorous plants. So one that is a very fast fleeting flower is round-lobed hepatica. These are interesting, beautiful little flowers. Their leaves, I don't have a great picture of their leaves. They sort of look like these three-lobed, settlers thought that they looked like livers and they called them liverwort. They were used for medicinal properties for liver illnesses. They're very interesting, but they're very quick. I actually haven't been able to see them this year. I've been looking and looking, and I may have missed them, but I'll see again tomorrow if I can find any. But they're quick and fleeting. They grow in a wide variety of soils. You can find them out in edges of woods, in the woods, or sometimes out in a field. So another one that really brings a smile to people's faces as they're searching the forest in early spring is the Virginia Spring Beauty, Claytonia virginica. It ranges in color from white to pink. Pollinators love it. I mean, bees love it. Mammals are known to eat the corms in them. They grow in moist woodlands. Seeing a lot of them really, it does indicate that the forest floor is healthy. They are not tolerant to a lot of pollutions and things. An interesting thing I've learned about these is that scientists weren't sure why they were still putting out white flowers when pollinators were much more attracted to the pink flowers, but they've actually found that the white flowers have an antifungal property to them and can help resist certain funguses in the moist, damp forest floors as they grow. So that's the Spring Beauty. So another, I'm probably going to say this about every plant. Another exciting flower is Bloodroot. It's such a metal plant. It's called Bloodroot because the root and the stem extrude a liquid that's sort of an orange red. Some people used to use it for dyes a long time ago. It is toxic, and it's a quick fleeting flower too. It's, as you can see in the top right picture, that was just a couple days after it had bloomed. They last probably 2, 3, maybe 4 days before they're just falling apart. They really like ants pollinating them and dispersing their seeds. You'll see that some of the wildflowers have a smooth stem and that sort of welcomes ants or small crawling bugs. up them. And if they have more of a hairy stem, it shows they'd probably prefer bees or other flying insects to pollinate them. But these can also self-pollinate. They don't really need a lot of others to do it. But what's so great about them is they have this one beautiful leaf that just gently wraps around them and embraces them as they bloom. They're just so special. All right, another one is the Trout Lily. It's a beautiful lily flower, grows around the same time as the bluebells, as you can see in that picture. You may see just a large area of just the one leaf on the forest floor, and the leaf looks like a trout. That's why it's called Trout Lily, the spots on the leaves. When there's just one flower, one leaf, it indicates that it's not going to flower from that spot. Only the few lucky ones that have two leaves will actually flower this year. I've also heard that scientists aren't quite sure why some of the anthers on the anthers are this part of the flower. Sometimes they're orange, sometimes they're yellow. They haven't quite figured out why there's a difference in them throughout the forest. But yes, these are pollinated by early spring bees. They're also called dogtooth violet because the shape of the corm, the roots, it looks like a tooth. They also point down in order to protect the flower from rain and other things that they enjoy being pollinated by early spring bees. That's Trout Lily. Now, wild geranium. This one's another fun one. It attracts a wide variety of pollinators. It's been known to be used medicinally. Right now, I don't think you'd really find them out there in bloom, but you may see a few of the leaves. These can tolerate many types of soils. This is also another one you could probably put in your garden. Don't take it from the wild, but you can find these at a local nursery. They can tolerate a wide variety of soils. They're found in upland forests and well-draining floodplains. And the andronid bee is a specialist pollinator for it. All right, so the cutleaf toothwort. This is another fun one that I keep finding, and not a lot of times the flowers are actually open. The flowers will only open when it's very sunny out. It's not going to waste its energy opening the flowers if it's rainy. When it's rainy, there's just less pollinators flying about. This is part of the mustard family, and this is actually one that is seriously threatened by the invasive garlic mustard. I'll be getting into garlic mustard in a little while, but it's an invasive introduced plant that's growing rapidly through the forests. So the West Virginia white butterfly is this is the host plant for that butterfly. Now, when that butterfly is seeking out this flower, it tastes each plant to test if it's part of the mustard family. And if it's on the garlic mustard, which in the middle picture, you can see just on the side right here, that's garlic mustard. So when this white butterfly lays its egg on the garlic mustard, the larvae will actually die when it eats it. But if it lays the egg on the toothwort, it's going to be fine. It's evolved to deal with all the special properties of this flower. So just wanted to mention its threat against one of our worst invasives, at least in our region. So yeah, these grow in rich woodlands. You can see them all over popping up through the forest right now. They're a lot of fun. Oh, and it's called, I want to mention that a lot of plants that end in wart are medicinal. These used to be used medicinally for tooth pain, as you can see by the name. All right, now Trillium is a very exciting flower. We have about 2 or 3 types in our region, but these are the 2 main Trilliums. These are a very particular plant in how they mature. From the point that their seeds are dispersed to the point where it actually flowers can take anywhere between 4 and up to 20 years to reach maturity. On average, it's about 5 to 7 years. These prefer shady, moist woodlands. They're loved by deer, so that can be an issue, but in areas where there's too much overgrazing by white-tailed deer, you'll notice that they start growing shorter every year just to sort of avoid them and camouflage. And a lot of them on the Trillium sessile, their leaves are speckled. I guess in this picture, I didn't catch one with the speckling on it, but it creates a bit of a camouflage for the deer so that they can't see it as well. Also, the click beetle is one of the main pollinators of it. I know I wrote they're pollinated by bees. They're also pollinated by bees, but also the click beetle enjoys them as well. And they'll also have little mating parties in the center of the flower while they're messily helping to pollinate the whole flower. And these are a protected plant. They're illegal to dig up. You can find them at local native nurseries. They're a cultivar by that point, but they're pretty and still important. And the Trillium grandiforum is a very beautiful statement flower. You'll find these all in shady woodlands. That's the Trillium. So the Twinleaf plant is beautiful, and I actually haven't been able to find it this year, so I had to borrow a picture from my friend botanist Bill Core. So this was named after Thomas Jefferson. It was discovered about 40 years before him, but then renamed for him because he was at that point Secretary of State. This is an early spring bloomer. It is a very fast, fleeting plant. It's almost impossible to catch, at least in my opinion. It's beautiful. It's got this butterfly-shaped leaves. It looks like it's two parts. That's why it's called twin leaf. It's spread by rhizomes. The seeds are dispersed by ants in that myrmecoccus way I told you about. And yeah, these grow in moist woodlands along rocky slopes. They prefer more alkaline soil. And that's the tree. So Dwarf Larkspur is a beautiful plant that is also widely available at nurseries to plant in your own home garden. I'm noticing now that there's chats. I did not see these before. All right, I'm going to get to those questions at the end because I will just get distracted. Okay, so Dwarf Larkspur, right now you'll only see the leaf right now that I have it in the center top. They're beautiful leaf, but you'll see as they grow taller, the leaf sort of stretches out. The flowers look like stars. They're also sort of related to the foxglove family. They're beautiful, bright purple. You'll see these amongst the trilliums, at least this section of Banshee Reeks. So yeah, they're toxic just like foxgloves, but they attract hummingbirds. I guess I spelled that wrong. Yeah, butterflies and moths and lots of other bees love them. They're not quite as effective at pollinating them as the long-tongued bumblebees and minor bees, but they can still enjoy them. All right, so early saxifrage is a very beautiful one as well. You can see on the left, it's in full bloom, it's tall. In the center, you can see it's already blooming and it's still so tiny, and then it starts to stretch up and out. It's one of those fuzzy stemmed ones that would prefer not to have crawling creatures like ants and beetles climbing up them to pollinate. It would prefer flying insects just as a more effective pollination for it. Saxifrage means rock breaker because these grow right on rocks. It's been said that they could probably grow so well that they'd crack the rock, but that's untrue. They just like to grow on top of the rocks. They're not going to intrude on the rock. Yes, and you'll find these all along the rockier areas around rivers. Now, one that looks very similar to it in a way and grows right next to it, at least everywhere I've seen it, is the plantain leaf pussy toes. These are named that because they look like little kitten paws, and they're adorable and fuzzy, and the leaves are evergreen. They last all winter, but the flower is short-lived, blooms around this time, March through April-ish, and oh, the painted lady butterfly uses it as a host plant. All right, this is one of my favorites, the Dutchmans Breeches. They're related to squirrel corn and bleeding hearts, which are all also native, but I wanted to highlight this one because it's a personal favorite. They look like little upside down pants, just hanging out to dry like laundry. These are toxic to most herbivores. In fact, it's also been known to be called lamb killer or goat killer because it's very toxic if you have goats or lambs around these. They grow better closer to shorelines of creeks and rivers. Only bees are strong enough to pollinate them, and they are another myrmecophorous plant. And they grow from corms. What I love about them, not only is about their flowers, I love their leaves. They're just so soft and delicate looking. All right, violets. Violets are underrated by, I don't know, people who want to weed their lawns. They're often sticking out of the grass and people want to take them out, but they are a beautiful plant and native. And if you have a problem with them in your garden or in your lawn, uproot them and move them to a more showier display for them because they are worth it. They are good eating for some animals. They are, they attract a variety of bees, moths, butterflies. And the seeds are also spread by ants again. Small mammals, turtles, insects are all known to feed on the plant. And they are also edible to humans. A lot of people can bake with them. You can make dyes out of the flower colors. And yeah, you can make them in a number of recipes. I wanted to mention the bird's foot violet on the bottom. I got that photo from Bill Core as well. It's called bird's foot because the leaves look like little bird's feet. And I just love the way that the color pattern in the flower looks. It's just so pretty. So those are the violets. We have a wide variety of them in Virginia. These are the most common ones you'll see around. All right, now we've got chickweed. So you're probably more familiar with common chickweed. There's also mouse ear chickweed. I know if you're into gardening, you're probably pulling a lot of these out of your garden constantly, and that's totally okay. The common chickweed and mouse ear chickweed are not native. They've become naturalized enough that our native pollinators can still feed from them, but I wanted to mention star chickweed because it is native and it is ephemeral in that the flowers are only in bloom for a short amount of time in the spring, like right now. And the flowers are a lot bigger than you'll see in the common chickweed or in the mouse ear chickweed. As you can see, they're in sort of different genuses though. But the common chickweed and star chickweed are the same genus. The star chickweed will have really pretty red anthers. You can sort of see it in this third flower right here. They're just a little bit bigger. I mean, they're still small, but they're striking when you see them in a path along the forest floor. And yeah, they grow in moist, rocky woodlands, pollinated by bees and flies and other flying insects around. All right, this is also another favorite flower of mine. It's called yellow Corydalis or pale Corydalis. There is a version of it where it doesn't have this sort of pretty ruffled cresting on the flower. And when it's smooth, it's called scrambled eggs. And it's in the same family as Dutchmans Breeches. You can see that the leaves look similar. They're soft and delicate looking, a little bit more deeper lobed than them, but the flowers are definitely taller. The leaves come up a bit higher. And as you can see right there, there's a tiny little type of fly in the dragonfly order feeding off of that flower. These are just so beautiful. They're becoming rare. In some states, they're threatened. You can find these all over Banshee Reeks on the western side though right now. And as you can see in the right picture, they're growing amongst honeysuckle and red dead nettle, which is, neither of those are native, but it seems to be doing okay so far. This one right here is just growing on a rock. So yes, they can grow in a number of places. They prefer it to be a little moist and woodland, like more alkaline soils though it seems. And it's another myrmecophorous plant where the ants dispense the seeds throughout the land. And it's in the fumewort family, as is Dutchman's Breeches. Now the May apple. This one is a beautiful ground cover you can have in your garden. I know you can buy these at local nurseries. They prefer a shadier area. I would say I'm sorry, I was just reading okay, let me answer this question about the skunk cabbage. So do most of these come out about the same time? I've sort of put them in order of when they leaf out or when they flower. So let me just, okay, so May apples, the leaves will emerge around now, early April, but then by, I'd say May 1st, that's when the flower comes out. All the others that I've discussed are, I'd say they all bloom around mid-March to beginning of May. Some of them are done before May starts. And dead nettle is a type of, it's in the mint family, but it's not native. While it can be a good ground cover, it's not native. It has become naturalized enough that bumblebees do love it. It can be attractive, a good garden plant, but it is not native. Okay, so then back to the May apple, you'll see that the leaf forms sort of an umbrella over the flower, and the flower has some properties in the petals that make it a little bit antifungal for the plant. You'll notice that there might be some downy mildew because these grow in very moist, shady conditions. So the flower will bloom by May, then it'll turn into a fruit, and the fruit will look like an apple. It's like a golden little apple. It's mostly toxic, but you shouldn't eat it. Some people can if you cook it down enough, but it's generally not allowed. So yeah, these will bloom by May, then the flower is gone by the end of May, but the leaves of it will stay up for most of the summer. So it's more that the flower is ephemeral, but not the plant, and the plant will die down by the fall. All right, now rue anemone is another really beautiful spring ephemeral that is actually quite easy to grow in your own home garden. You can buy them at local nurseries. This is called rue anemone. This is part of the rue family. The name means god of wind, which is because the slightest breeze will make the whole plant just go about. These have the longest bloom time of a lot of the plants, out of a lot of the ephemerals. So that also makes it a great attractive garden plant. They do enjoy some shade. And yeah, they're long blooming. And that is rue anemone. Let me just the mayapple is one of the most observed species during City Nature Challenge. Yeah, that's interesting. It is a beautiful plant. Anybody who discovers it and realizes what it is, you just fall in love with it and you notice it everywhere you go. Right about now, it's pretty cool to see them starting to emerge. They look like little zombies coming out of a graveyard. All right, now this one is a very rare, delicate, special flower. These are lady slippers. They're our native orchid. They are just rare. I haven't actually seen any myself growing in the wild. So I had to get these photos from Bill Core as well. But if you've ever seen nature shows with orchids, they're a funny plant for pollinating. The bee has to squeeze through this part and get through right there. And while it's trying to get out, it gets pollen on its back, stuck onto it by the orchid. And then this little pit at the bottom of it will collect any insects that want to go for it, and they fall in and die. Some of them will have crab spiders hidden inside that'll eat any new coming insect. And that little bit of it actually makes it sort of a disadvantage for its own genetics, because if it collects too many insects dead inside of it, the whole plant will die. So it won't be able to produce its seed from that plant. So that's its own bit of natural selection. If it just keeps getting too good at attracting insects and then they die inside, it's not going to spread its seeds. That's why orchids are just very special in that they can evolve almost quickly, quicker than some other flowers. So yeah, we have our own native orchids here. They're not just in the rainforest far, far away. Look at the chat here. Yeah, okay, everything is good. Okay, so the flower everybody's been waiting for, drum roll, the bluebells. Virginia bluebells. It is the most popular flower everybody talks about this time of year for any wildflowers in Virginia or this whole Maryland, DC, Virginia area. They're beautiful, they are prolific, they are fleeting, and they're just special. They look like cotton candy, ranging from colors of pink to purple to blue as they bloom. They'll turn blue by their full bloom opening time. You can see sometimes just as while it's still budding, it looks purple, sometimes it's pink, and sometimes it's a little even more blue already before it blooms. But yeah, it'll start changing colors as it leaves out. You'll see the leaves look more like spinach. So when you're looking for them and they may not be blooming yet, you'll notice the leaves first before the flowers, and they are beautiful. You'll find these along riverbanks, stream sides, mostly. Sometimes in some areas, like I believe like Bull Run Regional Park, it's just acres of it along the streams and rivers. They're beautiful. They actually don't depend on ants for seed dispersal. They just drop their seeds and hope that the water will take them away because they live in floodplains and near rivers. So they expect water to just rush all of the seeds into the water and dispense them all around again. So these are, I'd say, probably the least threatened of all of the wildflowers, yet they are still very special. Butterflies are the main pollinators. Their shape and their delicate flowers where they hang down like this makes them a little bit harder for bees and heavier flying insects to pollinate them. It just makes it a little difficult. So they prefer butterflies and moths. They also spread by rhizomes in case the seed dispense doesn't work. And yeah, they're a local favorite. I believe they should be the Virginia state flower. The Virginia state flower right now is the dogwood flower, which it's also our state tree. So I really feel like we should change that. One plant shouldn't take up both categories. And yeah, so bluebells are a hit everywhere. You'll find them at every state park right now where there is a bit of water. And I believe deer love to eat them as well. Let me just check the chat for questions. Oh yes, I can send out the copy of the slideshow to everybody. All right, now, these were all the spring ephemeral wildflowers I discussed today. These are the main ones that you would see at, let's say, Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve, where I work. You may see a couple other types that I may have not listed. I didn't try to cover any non-native wildflowers like the dead nettle or ground ivy. Dead nettle, like I had said earlier, it's become naturalized, so some of our pollinators enjoy them and they're fine, but they are not native. They're not from here. And so that was most of them. But what I also wanted to discuss is what we can do about saving them or protecting them or just finding ways to enjoy them better, making sure that they're here for generations to come. So the threats to native spring ephemerals. So the biggest problem is invasive plants and allelopathic plants. Allelopathic means that a plant will extrude certain enzymes and poisons, you could call them, into the soil, intoxicating the area around them, leaving the soil just a much harder area for certain things to thrive in. Garlic mustard is the worst for this, I guess the best at being allelopathic. In this picture on the left, you can see almost a sea of garlic mustard. This plant was brought here by early settlers as a garden plant. It's edible, it's yummy. It tastes like garlic and mustard, and you can make all sorts of foods with it. Okay, so another threat is habitat loss and trampling by humans and overgrazing from deer. So, you know, in our ever developing area, habitat loss is a huge issue. We've got to protect wild spaces. We've got to do better at maybe trying to, when you buy a house and, you know, it's taken over a natural area and they've just totally graveled it down and put your house there, you can do things to restore your native habitat. You've got to install native plants that will help your native wildlife. It may not be back to its forested landscape as it once was, but it is your responsibility to create a habitat in your habitat. So that being said, obviously, you can't get every single one of these flowers that I've mentioned as a spring ephemeral in your house or in your garden. Some of them are cultivated and sold at local nurseries. You've got to make sure you select them from local places. There's a few native nurseries around here that specialize in native plants. While Watermark Woods is my personal favorite. It's over in Hamilton, about 10 minutes from Leesburg, and they specialize in native plants. It's very important that we reinstall some of the habitat that we are losing constantly. And in areas where we have threats of losing a ton of land to development, try to do what you can, keep up to date with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy and other places that are fighting to keep these places preserved, because it does matter. And so yes, I guess we'll move on to, or go back into the invasive plants part. So as you can see on the left, we've got ground ivy, hairy vetch, as you can see a little bit in there, and garlic mustard. In the middle, got a whole patch of honeysuckle, totally engulfing this trailside area around Banshee Reeks. And then on the right here, we've got ground ivy, which is not native, and honeysuckle emerging. And this is just detrimental. We lose this whole area on this picture on the right could be filled with all sorts of native spring ephemerals or just, you know, native plants. And we've lost all the habitat just to these plants that shouldn't be here. Honeysuckle may smell sweet and taste sweet, but it is one of the worst plants that is threatening our native places or natural places. They grow fast, they spread rapidly, they crowd out native plants, and they take over large areas very quickly. So I listed the bad plants here. These are just the ones that we have the biggest problem with at Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve, and I know that they're a huge problem in all of the Northern Virginia, Maryland area. I ordered it by how bad they are, but they're sort of all equal. Autumn olive is one of the worst ones we have at Banshee Reeks. It's the flowering shrub on the left. It was once brought here as an ornamental shrub. It came from, I believe, Russia at first, and it's got delicious edible berries in the fall, and the flowers smell sweet, but they do nothing for the environment. Birds don't really go for them. Bees don't go for the flowers. And the shrubs turn into dense thickets that are just multi-stemmed trunks that are just almost impossible to cut down. And in the second picture there, we've got more garlic mustard. The third picture there, that's oak leaf shapes of honeysuckle. Honeysuckle can come up in either an oak leaf shape or more of a lancelet shape. Mile-a-minute, I don't have a picture of in there, but it starts growing in the mid-May, and it can grow inches an hour, some say, maybe inches in a day. They call it mile-a-minute because it grows so fast. If you set up a time release in front of some mile-a-minute, you will see a big difference in one day. Did I say time? Yeah. Then lesser celandine is a huge threat to moist wetlands. It's a beautiful plant in the buttercup family. It is a buttercup. The flower is really pretty. The leaves are pretty, but they're very bad. They grow thick, dense mats that just overcrowd the whole wetland, and none of the other wetland plants are able to thrive because of it. So these are just our main ones. There's a lot of other threats out there. I'd say when it comes to things like dead nettle and ground ivy, they're not as bad. Ground ivy just really takes off though, and I just prefer it if it wasn't here. But we've got plenty of other invasive non-native plants that are crowding out Banshee Reeks right now, like multiflora rose and wineberry bush and others. So again, stay on the path when you're out looking for these flowers. Trampling by humans is a huge problem for certain spring ephemerals. Just stay on the path. That being said, if you see garlic mustard along the path, feel free to pull it wherever you are. I am not condoning this at my place of work, but if nobody does it, it's not going to get done. So this is an example I wanted to show of my own backyard right here. This goes back to restoring your own habitat. Now I can't, I don't have a lot of spring ephemerals, I'd say, in my backyard or on my property yet. But I don't know, every year I grow more plants. But so this is just an example of how my backyard looked at the beginning of, I believe, like February of like 2017. And then this was my backyard last year in the summer. Obviously, a lot of those plants aren't native. I've got zinnias and tithonias. But the point is just to provide as much plants for the environment, for a habitat. I've this year made my home and property a certified wildlife habitat through the Audubon at Home program through Loudoun Wildlife. And I have a lot of native plants in there that you can't really see. I've got asters and goldenrod and solidago and things. But the point is just try to recreate habitat in your own space. So again, what can you do to help? You can volunteer for invasive removal walks. I know Loudoun Wildlife has a few. There's, I know recently they did one for pulling garlic mustard at Balls Bluff. Where you can pull invasives, just do it, but just try to stay on the path. Don't trample anything. Get to know what invasives you need to pull are, how to do it safely. Get rid of all the noxious and invasive plants on your property. If you have autumn olive, get it down. If you have honeysuckle, get it gone. These spread rapidly and they grow fast, and you just got to get rid of them wherever you can. Also, always just be on the lookout for local native ephemerals at nurseries that you can bring home. When you're out exploring, log your findings onto iNaturalist. This helps scientists and naturalists understand what is here, what we need to protect. It helps a lot of data for a lot of different things, even from political to real estate to all sorts of things. Just also spreading the awareness. The more you all know and learn about these spring ephemerals, you're going to spread the word out to everybody else, and people will start understanding that, yeah, we've got some really cool plants right nearby at state parks and preserves and near rivers, and we need to protect them. So where can you find all these flowers, like what I was just discussing? You can find them at Banshee Reeks Nature Preserve at Leesburg. Point of Rocks, Maryland. My husband took the kids today up to there to get them out of the house so I could do this talk. And they found Dutchmans Breeches and bluebells and all sorts of things. And it was exciting for me that he knew what they were, because I've been practicing this talk all week. And at Great Falls National Park, Blue Ridge Center for Environmental Stewardship, Bears Den, Bull Run Regional Park, Thompson Wildlife Management Area, and Riverbend Park. There's plenty of areas. Really, anywhere that's hikeable, you could find some really cool wildflowers. Take pictures, draw them, journal them, do everything you can to understand them, because they are all very special. Now, some organizations that you can explore to learn more at, or to get to see where you can volunteer, or just to read up on any of your favorite topics that have to do with nature or plants. Here's some of these organizations. And now, if anybody has any questions, let's discuss now. Let's see. Do I ever have volunteers clearing out the invasives at Banshee Reeks? Sometimes. We've had, it's been a strange time at Banshee Reeks. I would love it if we had a lot more people cutting invasives, but for some reason, I don't know whether it's a county issue, because we're a Loudoun County Parks and Recreation Preserve. It seems that at this moment, maybe people are more scared to trample the plants than to cut the invasives. That one's sort of a touchy topic, I think, just with the political aspects of maybe upper management. But we would love it if we could have some invasive walks at Banshee Reeks. Now, as for tours at Banshee Reeks Native Plants, this Wednesday we're celebrating National Walking Day by having 5 types of walks between 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have a history walk with our historian, a tree walk, a birds walk, a amphibians, reptiles walk, and then my walk is at 1 p.m. to go explore the wildflowers on the western side of Banshee Reeks. And then also next Sunday, the 11th, is the Loudoun Wildlife Walk that I'm hosting. But unfortunately, it's already full, and there's only a 10 people limit because of COVID. Somebody asked, what is the seemingly invasive ground cover getting ready to bloom bright yellow right now? It's crazy. We're having a tough time getting it out. Ground cover that's yellow. Oh, I'd have to see a picture. I'm not really sure. Oh, okay, you figured it out. What? I just would like to know what would. Lesser celandine. Okay, yeah, that's the one I was talking about. Yeah, that one you got to pull everywhere you can, because it'll create thick, dense mats and create a monoculture that becomes just impossible and becomes just a food desert. Just it really robs the area of life. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about autumn olive. So autumn olive, it is a very deeply rooted tree. It starts off as just a shrub. Starts off just as a one stem shrub, but when you try to pull it, it's almost impossible. Even just a few feet high, you can't pull it out of the earth. And not only that, it'll start growing very rapidly. It only loses leaves for about a month of winter, so it can still keep continuing to grow strong all through most of the year. I'd say about 11 months of the year. Then it has a ton of berries. Some birds might eat them, but most of the time they just drop to the ground and then reseed, and they can cover large areas with thick, dense mats of these huge trees that are just multi-stemmed shrubs that are just almost impossible to cut. We are constantly battling them at Banshee Reeks because the farmers that used to have the property in the 1940s, 1950s thought that they could put this new pretty ornamental tree on their property because it's very pretty, but they had no idea the impact of it, and it is spread all over the Banshee Reeks area. If you're driving down Evergreen Mills past Banshee Reeks and sort of towards the landfill, you'll see autumn olive spreading all through the land there, on the opposite side of the landfill, so in people's yards and things, and people don't understand how terrible this plant is. It decimates habitat. It becomes a food desert, a monoculture of just this tree that nothing can benefit from. No wild animals, no insects, no birds can actually benefit from these. So for the signing up for the wildflower walk, you don't have to sign up, you can just come. Mine is at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. And let me see if I have any other questions to answer. Okay, anybody else have any questions? You can also unmute and talk. Let's see, I think I did great on time. I'm going to actually go back a few slides so you can just look at some of these flowers. All right, so any other questions here? Oh, somebody saw the twin leaf at Ball's Bluff. I gotta go see that. And
Yeah, we've been pulling garlic mustard there, and just it's been fantastic watching what changes every week.
I bet. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've seen in just 2 weeks another garlic mustard spread a lot more at Banshee Reeks. Somebody said deer are eating the raw geranium. That is one downside to that beautiful plant, is that deer do love them also. But it's a great one because you can easily grow it in your own garden. Great. Anybody have any other questions? Favorite flower they want to talk about? PJ, are you guys doing any more invasive walks at Ball's Bluff?
I'm going to be pulling a few more times with some people, like on Thursdays, for a few more weeks. That we noticed that the garlic mustard is just now starting to start forming blooms. So we have a few weeks probably till it starts dropping seeds again, I guess, which is not good.
Garlic mustard interesting because of the 1 year and 2 year cycle. The first year they come up and they look more like the pictures I've been showing. And the second year they really start blooming, and those are the ones that set off their seeds.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Amy. I'll work with you on getting a wrap-up email out to everybody with the links and the presentation.
I see a question in the chat box about Japanese stiltgrass recommendations for control.
Yes. Japanese stiltgrass is a tough one. I don't ever condone using pesticides. As a naturalist and at my nature preserve, we can't use any sort of poisons or pesticides. It's actually a little satisfying, but it is overwhelming when you have to so much of it. You could use manual things like tilling and disking the area. And yeah, stiltgrass can also become a little bit allelopathic as well and start making it harder for other plants to grow. I think it's also known that they don't grow well around beech trees, but that's not going to help in like your own home yard. Any other questions?
Thank you, Amy.
I hope everybody had fun. I know I had a lot of fun finding all these beautiful flowers. And they have fresh food a little bit there. Here they are.
Okay, thanks for joining us, and I'm going to try and make it on Wednesday. See you.
It's a beautiful day.